Hello and welcome, English language teachers worldwide. It's time for another American TESOL Institute webinar with yours truly, Fluency MC in the place to be. Yeah, Jason R. Levine also. And I have the privilege and honor of being here to offer you CPD, continuing professional development, courtesy of the American TESOL Institute. So, English teachers, whatever your experiences as teachers, if you're just getting started, if you have experience, we hope you'll benefit from attending here live or watching asynchronously. And we've begun a series, especially for people getting started in ELT. Last month, I did a webinar called From Rules to Results, which focused on real foundational stuff, including things like what's the difference between EFL and ESL. The reason for the title was looking at the progression of, sort of the earliest approaches to ELT, and then what is generally used, recommended today. And this month is really a continuation of that. I mean, it's a series, so everything kind of connects. But we're going to talk about things today that we started talking about last time, but going into a bit more detail. So if you haven't seen the webinar from last month, I recommend checking it out. However, you definitely do not need to watch it first to watch this one, whether you're here live with us, thank you, or watching asynchronously later. So the title this month, Who Are You Leading? So I guess before is sort of where were we heading? Who are you leading? Getting into methods and that we're using today, and especially, this is the who, looking at approaches to teaching children up through young learners, let's say children, adolescents, and adults. What can we see that is in common? We have in common when we're teaching these groups. What's different when we're teaching these groups? So that's going to be our main focus. And I want to start with the question: what's one word that describes your ideal role as a teacher? So for me, the first word that pops into my mind is facilitator, right? Trying to bring in things and for the students to practice English, improve English, communicative activities, and act as a facilitator. Did any of you choose a pedagogue? I never liked this term, but I didn't really understand what it meant. And when I was preparing for this webinar, looking at sort of the past and the present, it's interesting because this word seems like a very old-fashioned word, and certainly when you look at the origin of it, which I hadn't known, we see how old that word must be. But it's not the students are a receptacle and we're just filling it. It's really that guide idea. It's not the sage on the stage. It's more the guide on the side, right? In the sense that you're leading. At least, I mean, there are different ways to think about leading, different types of leaders, but I think of facilitating activities very similar to the idea of leading activities. Not that you are, separate from the group. The problem, I think, is being a pedantic, the adjective we use a lot. We don't usually use, I guess it's pedant, a pedagogue and a pedant. I mistakenly thought pedagogue was more the pedant, I guess. Maybe it's just the ped part. But if you're too focused on, how you're teaching, the method, I've got to stick with this. We talked about this last month. I think that's the issue. But if you're leading students and you're putting them at the center of learning and you are guiding them. So it turns out pedagogue is not such a bad term at all, although the connotations of it may not be great, especially when you consider where it comes from. Oh my goodness. But this is what I was just saying, that except not talking about the risk. I think there's definitely a risk for anyone to, especially when you're starting out, obviously, and learning about different methods, to feel need to follow a certain way of teaching, um, and kind of putting things in boxes with rules, and so forth. And I definitely went through that period, so it's also possible to be too pedantic. I think I was many years ago, and learn from your mistakes, and that's fine. But if you can, reflect on this at the start, then I think it will be a much better experience for you and your students to not go through a period where you're, maybe a bit too rigid. I mean, I'm not saying I was super rigid, but looking back, I did feel, kind of naively, oh well, I'm learning this method, I should follow this way, and definitely too much on the side of, we're going to get into this a lot today, trying to get students who are adolescents and young adults to really analyze language, and, kind of the meta cognition thing, which I was told, young adults needed, but learned the hard way that that's not always the case. So at the start, I had mentioned, what's in common or what overlaps, but teaching young learners and adults, and we're going to see, I think, a lot more overlaps than you might think. You should know methods, and we talked about them last time. We're going to talk about them again, but much like in therapy, I think too. I think the best therapy. Not to get on a long tangent about that, but it just occurred to me. I mean, the best therapy often is not, oh, you have to follow this approach to as a psychologist or something. It's more, okay, that person, who they are, what's appropriate for them. If you have a big group of students, is that possible? No, not for each individual, but you can, by really thinking about who your learners are, you can make have a better match, a better fit for them. So, you know, if we're talking in general terms, what do you think? Same teaching method for a 6-year-old and 36-year-old? So I think there's nobody that would say use the same teaching method exactly. But there could be some things that could work for both. For example, you could use the same method, but have a different energy with that method. Keep that in mind, because we're going to come back to that. Uh, or you might realize that really a completely different approach is needed. Context differences could depend on how many students you have, how, quote, mature they are, how much their level is very important. So obviously, a young learner with a very high level, and if they're also, super smart, for example, your group, then, and aware of a lot of things and using their second language, and then you're comparing that to an adult who's A1. So you can see, there's so much variability, which can be, a little daunting at first if you're in a situation where you have to kind of adapt. But it makes it much more challenging and interesting, I think, to, it's that psychology again, to figure out what's best for the students you have. It's that fit, right? So when you see things out there, oh, this is the best method, or this is the best way, I would immediately start thinking about what we're talking about now. Maybe it is, and maybe it isn't, um, depending on who your learners are. So before we ask what works, we should ask, who are we leading? So let's talk about some real basic stuff with children and some real basic stuff with adults before we continue. So, pedagogy, which is used for learning in general, originally focuses on the child, right? So that's the ped prefix there. So here's some things we can definitely agree on. I think that generally speaking, they're more dependent. They're not going to on their own go off and learn things, at least not in traditional ways. If they could be engaging in activities in English, which are not necessarily, I'm taking charge of my own learning stuff that adults do, but they could be doing things independently for sure. Um, Shorter attention spans, again, in general, right, because of their age. Developing metacognition. The next slide, I'm going to go into that because that's really important. So wait a moment on that. And the last one, I think, is the biggest one. It doesn't mean that uh, adults don't learn through experience, movement, and repetition. But if we're thinking about a classroom, especially with the attention span issue and the metacognition, that you're not going to do the same types of activities usually. Sometimes you would, but if we're talking about the youngest learners, things like movement, especially, and repetition could engage them in ways that working with adults would not. Either they feel maybe it's too childish, or that repetition needs to happen in other ways, not in classroom activities as much as outside of the classroom. So metacognition, right? The idea of reflecting on your own thinking, knowing how you learn something. This is, I think, the biggest difference between young learners and adults. But interestingly, it doesn't necessarily mean, in many cases, it really shouldn't be, that you teach adults things where they are thinking more about grammar rules, understanding abstract explanations, because they may be able to do that, adults, because they develop metacognition, but that's not going to facilitate language acquisition. It might, in fact, impede language acquisition. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's look at it first for kids. So, um, as they're still learning how to learn, it's not the moment to do activities where they are, again, reflecting on their thinking, looking at rules of the language. Um, you know, why is this right? Why is this wrong? It's more that it just we're going to look into activities, approaches and activities, but it's more about just as much as possible immersing themselves in the language, in enjoyable, fun ways with meaningful repetition. And again, that also might be true for adults, but adults also may be more interested and benefit more from activities where they are, using more analytical thinking. So, the important thing here, I think, more than anything else, is if you make the mistake of talking too much about the language with young learners, and instead of giving them just opportunities to immerse themselves in it. But again, as quickly as soon as I say that, I want to think, does that mean adults should not be immersed? Absolutely, they should, but they have the tendency often to want to also have more explanations, understand why, and that can help them be motivated if that's how they learned how to think, thinking about their own thinking. So I don't think this term is used very often, or at least I don't use it. If we have pedagogy and andragogy, but that's the adult word. I just thought it'd be fun to bring in these words. They were we put it together on the description for the webinar, so I wanted to talk about them a bit. Again, very generally, adults, right, are more independent learners, so they're more self-directed if they're motivated, right? And all of these things, if they're motivated. Kids, if you get them engaged in something fun, that's often enough to keep their attention and have them want to keep doing things in a second language. So, the big issue with adults often is, are they interested enough? So that, because if they are, then they will be more self-directed. They will be more goal-oriented. Or if they come with a goal already, they need to get a score on a test, or they need to, interview for a job, then you can work directly with that as part of their motivation to use English as a second language. Bringing prior not, excuse me, sorry. Bringing prior knowledge, if it's from their first language, about how language works, can be great if you harness that. On the other hand, if you're like me, you've worked with adults that don't have, necessarily a high command of language in their first language. They don't have they've never really developed critical thinking skills in their first language. So, that depends. Um, and the last one here, I think, this is often also, if adults are paying for it for themselves, wanting to feel like, I can use this right away, do this right away, where kids, the activity itself, may be enough to satisfy them. So, just like we looked at the metacognition slide with kids, it's really the same thing I want to talk about here. These are the principles that you find online often. It's not just six of them, but usually you see these six. And what's important here, I think, is, are these always, well, benefits or advantage or disadvantage is not the right thing, but should we always uh, choose a method or plan activities for adults because of these principles? For example, adults need to know why. Why is it the present perfect and not the preterite? Why? And they don't always need to, but right, or try to understand, use their analytical thinking to, why is this phrasal verb have this preposition, this particle, and not this one? Those kinds of things. So, if it motivates them to know, for you to explain certain things, and certainly if you teach adults, you should feel comfortable, with second language acquisition and linguistics, to be able to answer their questions, to be able to say you know, why the present perfect and the predator are different. But is it always good in an activity to focus on this? Could it, as I said a few moments ago, interfere with acquisition if they're stopping to think about the language and not just getting exposure to it, in an enjoyable and meaningful way? So, I wanted to look at that. I think the self-directed and bring experience part, you can really build on that. Again, the immediate relevance could be an issue, because if they're expecting, oh, why can't I do this now, when a child doesn't? The problem with that is that it's, you can't get fluent in, a month or 2 months or whatever people offer. So that can also be an issue. Um, and adults are problem oriented, great for specific tasks that you want to, how can we, in communicative language teaching, we'll talk about in task-based learning. So I think this is a good thing. I was laughing at the last one already. Adults are internally motivated. Hmm. I'm not so sure. I mean, I guess the idea is that, I'm going to go take this class because I need English, whereas a kid might be, well, I don't, care about English. At the same time, it's often the opposite, I think, in my experience, that, motivation is, we can kill it in kids, but it's easier to harness it because it's kind of naturally there to want to, suck up language. Um, so anyway, I want to consider these things as we continue. So I often show this slide, and today, what I want to talk about with this slide is that, when you're teaching kids or adults, in order for them to move up here, this is Bloom's taxonomy of cognitive objectives. It's not, I'm talking about language learning. But I want to explain what I mean about the language learning piece. So, a common misconception would be, oh, adults can think at higher levels. They can, analyze and evaluate, for example. Well, if they can in their first language, that doesn't mean they're going to be able to in their second language. So forget for a moment the ones I said earlier that maybe can't even do that in their first language. Let's say you've got some adults that, are able to think critically. Um, higher or capable of higher order thinking. We often make the mistake of then thinking, okay, well, they can do that then in a second language. I don't think anybody says that, but we kind of take it for granted. Oh, they're adults, they're smart. We can get them uh, get them up there doing that because otherwise they'll be bored if they're doing things that are just, if we look at the bottom, recalling facts and basic concepts. The problem is that most adults, you teach are not going to be at B2 C1 level, right? In the second language. So that means, yes, they're adults and they might be very competent in their first language, but without building a base at the bottom, right, they're not going to be able to move up. So how do you build that base? It could be some of the things I mentioned before, and we'll talk about with adults, but many of the things that work with kids, it's more about, in terms of getting this fit, not doing the exact same activity, but adapting activities for kids, for adults that uh, do not require, or that's not the best way to say it, that don't focus on, asking why, how does that work? What's the grammar structure here? All of that metacognition stuff can get in the way. So keep that in mind. I'm going to talk about that as we proceed. So this is kind of going back to where we were at the beginning. As we look at the methods, let's remember, right? It's the best fit could be that this method is better for young learners than adult learners. And indeed, we're going to kind of look at kind of generally what's better for young and adult. But the best fit is certainly not this one's for young adults, young learners, sorry, and this one is for adult learners. So let's start with young learners. Um, I chose three, and we talked about a few of these that we were talking about today. We talked about very briefly last time, so I want to get more into them here and activities that you can do. So, I'll try not to keep saying, "Oh, this is good for both young learners and adults," every time I talk about it. But I certainly will explain how I think something like total physical response can actually work with adults. But if we had to choose, definitely a better fit for young learners. It can backfire with adults if they feel like it's too much of like a children's activity. So what's a basic example? A basic example of this would be like, where I'm going to everybody, get up, sit down, right? I'm associating what I'm saying with a movement, right? But it could be a story that you tell, and in the story, when there are moments with actions that the students have to play along, so they watch you doing that, and then they follow. How does it mimic first language acquisition? Well, if you're immersed in your first language, right? You are on a daily basis seeing movements and seeing things happen with the language. So that's really important. And the affective filter, which he talked about last time, the idea of feeling relaxed and not stressed. It's not like, oh, this is a lesson, right? I'm going to show you some more examples in a moment. And the movement, we encode things into memory much better when we're movement. Again, could be adults too, but how do you do something like this with adults with movement is a little trickier, whereas kids, Simon Says is a great example of TPR. And then a song like this. So I usually, before I do the song, okay, everybody, follow me. Turn it on. Turn it on. Turn it off. Turn right, left. Turn it up. Turn it down. Right? Put it in. Take it out. So having a pen, put it in. Take it out. But then I have a song to practice it. So oops, sorry, I went the wrong way again. So here, right, I've marked the stress. It's not just the listening to it. TPR can also be with words, and it can be in a song. So if they have a pen, usually do this with a pen, take it out, put it in, and practicing it with the rhythm, take it out, put it in. Of course, not talking about these are phrasal verbs, grammar structure, right? So all the things we're talking about with kids, the whole point is to, not get under the hood and look at what the grammar's called and how it works. You might do a little bit of that after these activities with older learners, but for now, let's just imagine these are pretty young learners, and they might not even understand all these words to the song, but they'll understand the important ones, right? So this is the first one. Oh, take the pen, put it down, pick it up. And you can see the little refrain here, listen, watch, repeat, and even that, right? So I usually do listen, watch, repeat, and you can use them when you need them. And if you got the pen, right? Every time you pick up a pen and start speaking, here's another example, um, which is dictation. So as I mentioned, you could do TPR in a story. This is not exactly a story, but well, it's a story, right? And you could make this more complicated, less complicated, but basically everybody stand up, okay? Um, I have when it's time to go to school. This one is time to go to work. Let's imagine it's school, but you see, I use this with adults. It works too. Um, but so it's time. Everybody stand up. It's time to go to school. Again, maybe not put your phone in your pocket, depending on what school you're going to. Well, actually, put your phone in your pocket and don't look at it at school. Anyway, put on your watch, pick up your keys, put them in your bag, go out of your apartment, right? So the movements are happening with the language. And I do this a few times with them. You can even get a student to, have them, you could do kind of a gap fill, like pick up your, and they'll say keys, right? And then you hit them with this, which is, I call this a blank dictation. And they go, what? Are you kidding? I could never do this. But then it's amazing what they can remember. You can kind of give them hints. So if we go back here, right? It's time to go to work. What was the first thing I said? It's what? Oh, it's time to, and they start writing it down. So then you're getting writing practice. It wasn't like, okay, we're going to practice writing. It just kind of flows naturally. That's a great extension of TPR. And um, what I usually do, not usually, what we always do with these is after a little bit, they'll be like, I can't remember. Oh, do you want me to do it again? You can do it again. You can read part of it. You can read it fast. You could have them just listen. You could have them take notes. They love it. And by the time you're done, they've heard it so many times, they'll they'll remember. And you can do other activities with the language that you just practiced. As you saw a lot of it, let's go back and look at it, is phrasal verbs again that are very useful. Direct method, again, used with young learners and adults, but why did I include it in best fit for young learners? Similar to TPR, you're not focusing on, the grammar structures or what it is, right? It's the meaning of it before the form. Um, you know, Visuals, gestures, modeling. TPR is much more like actually physically doing something. This is so, I mean, TPR definitely can be kind of included with a direct method. TPR is more of a certain type of activity, and direct method is more of a method. But I'll show you some examples of direct method that are not, TPR. And the repeated exposure really for everything we're talking about to build that foundation and for kids. So let's take a look. I have an activity I developed with Mr. Bean, which is, I think, a good example of direct method. So I have a video of Mr. Bean goes to the swimming pool. I have a video. It's on YouTube. So you can go check that out if you like. I'm not going to show it to you. I'm just going to explain the activity. Basically, at that moment, 31 seconds, 35 seconds, right? what you can do is play it, pause it, and say, "Where's Mr. Bean?" Now, with depending on their level, you could elicit from them the answer. He's at the swimming pool. What is he wearing? He's wearing a swimming suit. But in most cases, I would not say this or show this slide. I would do something like this and either say it or display it or both. This activity, you could really vary it depending on if you want to focus on reading or not, if you want just listening, if you want them to be able to see it, if it makes it easier for them. So, most of my classes where I would use this, I do this one. Is he at the swimming pool or at the beach? Uh, and everyone, people say, "Oh, swimming pool." Okay, so is he at the swimming pool or at the beach? You want to try to elicit, he's at the swimming pool. So if they say swimming pool, is he at the swimming? Is he in the swimming pool? Oh no, he's at the swimming pool. So you get everyone, repeating that. He's at the swimming pool. What is he wearing? Is he wearing pants or a swimming suit? He's wearing a swimming suit. Now, if that is too difficult, right? Is he at the swimming pool or at the beach? You could display this. Is he at the swimming pool or at the beach? So then they see it. He's at the swimming pool. And this is also good if you start the activity, you've never done it, because you can do this with any video you like. And I should be emphasizing that, kind of taking it for granted. I'm choosing things that you could do with, so like the dictation before. You could use that dictation for anything, any level, anything you're doing, any content. And I mentioned the song. I have lots of songs to practice with, but anyway, you don't have to use, only this particular for this particular activity. So imagine any video you wanted. I like Mr. Bean because there isn't speaking or very, very little. So this is really trying to get the students to produce. But if you say, "Where is he?" and they don't know how to say he's at the right. So getting back to it, when you're first introducing this activity, or when I do it, I often do this one and then kind of get them, or the next day. That's another thing. You could start with this and then "Where's Mr. Bean?" and have them, without reading it, try to elicit the answer. This is also, they could also have, this on paper or on an iPad or whatever you're using, and have them, check it also. So it could be also just, not so much production necessarily. It could also just be listening to you, can they, and have them choose. But generally, this is for speaking practice, the way I use it. By the way, I'm happy as always to send this as a PDF. So, if you like this activity, you could use this specific one, or I think you can see how you could apply this to any video that you like. Here's another example of direct method, and this is leading up to a song because I focus on using songs in games so much. We're going to get to games soon. But you don't have to. This doesn't have to be a song. So what I do with this, I say, "Okay, we're going to have a conversation." This is great for kind of middle school learning the past tense. And so then, may or may not be learning, the form of the past tense. But anyway, the idea is, meaning before form. So for this, it would be, I would introduce it before I get so into the grammar with them, if I even do it at all. If they get enough practice with it, they may figure it out themselves, right? Look at the patterns here with the questions. So you need did for the questions. Oh, what did you do last night? So I say, okay, we're going to practice a conversation. What are these? Oh, the questions. Okay, let's practice them. What did you do last night? What did you have them repeat it, right? So that's very, direct method. And then, oh, what's this? Oh, these are the replies, the responses, the answers. Okay, let's practice those. I went out with some friends. I saw Yolanda and Ben. So not talking about I often say, when is this conversation? Is this the past, the present, or the future? Oh, it's the past. Okay. So, that's important, but not, noticing the form or how it works, or oh, irregular verb, right? So you might also be doing that, but this activity at least is focusing really on the direct method. And then, oh, how about I'm read black and you read blue? And then you could also put them in groups to practice this. Okay, what did you do last night? I went out with some friends. Who did you see? I saw Yolanda and Ben. Now, this happens to be a song, but you don't have to do it as a song. And you could take a dialogue from a book that you're using, or write your own dialogue and do something like this with young learners, even without. I think the rhyming, the rhythm really makes a big difference. And I have a video for this. And also you could switch the roles, obviously. So people who are asking the questions, right? But what they're getting practice with, without explicit grammar explanation is, oh, well, when you ask the question, you're using did and the base form, but when you answer, you're using the past tense, right? So we don't say, how did you got there? Um, you know, uh, did you stayed, right? Which is a common mistake. So this is a good moment to talk about adults again. So I have adults who will make that mistake. Did he went? What's going to help that adult to review that? No, in when you ask a question, in the simple past, you use the base form of the question because you're already using the, do the operator in the past. I think most adults know that. So how do you avoid the mistake? Well, it's the repetition. So if this activity wouldn't work for adult, it would be a good fit. That's what we're focusing. What's a good fit? Is there another activity where, and I'll suggest one, where adults could get meaningful repetition and correction with asking questions in the past simple. So I'm going to tell you what that one is. I have to remember to do that because I don't have a slide for it, but I will, because it's really, really important for them as well to get practice and feel confident asking questions with accurate grammar and answering with accurate grammar. So I have a video for this. It's called What Did You Do Last Night? So if you go to my channel, you can see it if you look up What Did You Do Last Night, or past tense fluency MC. And I think I said it, but let me say it again. I don't think I finished my idea. If you want a PDF of this presentation so you can see, because I'm going to show you some other activities, like the dictation one, for example. You don't have to remember how I did it. I can send you a PDF of this. My email is fluencymc at support at fluencymc.com. I'll remind you at the end, support at fluencymc.com, and I'm happy to send you that. So one more for young learners. So gamification, I don't usually like that word, but I chose it here because what I do like about it, I just like games. We're going to play games. But what I do like about it is that you can take an activity that you would not think is a game and make it a game or gamify it. So I want to show you an example of that, and then an example of, a more structured game on a platform that I often talk about. So what's important? Ooh, let me go back. Boy, this mouse, I really shouldn't be using the mouse is the thing. Yes, I don't usually, and that's the problem. Okay, anyway. So having a purpose, not just playing a game for the sake of playing a game. But if a game is in English, then you're playing with a purpose. If your purpose is to help them build English. But anyway, I mean, I think of this as more, okay, what are we practicing? Is there something that we can, because games are so powerful, are we focusing on something in this game that's going to really help them? And that's the purpose. And then, how much competition, how much not, your learners, but if they enjoy playing games for, so I usually use candy, or stuff like that, low stakes stuff. So they want to always keep playing. But let me show you a couple of things. So first, this is from a story I wrote. And it's very basic syntax, these sentences in the first chapter. So this is a scramble. It's a sentence scramble or a word scramble rather, where they need to make the correct sentence. Now, this could be the most boring activity in the world, but it's very useful actually. But if they're interested, so how can you make it for syntax and getting repetition? So when you can make it a game, you can just put people in teams of two, and the first people to finish correctly, so some people will rush through it and make mistakes, and you'll have to come back and say, and what I like to do is, no, two of them are wrong, eight of them are correct or whatever. So just something like that. Or you could do more of a sentence scramble or a story scramble, which either with sentences, which goes before. This is a story I wrote about my experience taking the GRE. So this is something I've done with high school and university students. So again, this is works for adults and kids, which is great when you can find something that fits both. Um, so that's the story. And then what you can do, I just took the first part and broke it into mix the four parts. So they have to, and you could cut this out, or you could just have them see it like this. I like cutting them out if you have time to do that, and they have to kind of arrange them. Um, and it starts out, the first one is, okay, you're never going to believe this. This also helps with like, how you tell stories, then it's I woke up early, everything seemed cool, and finally this, and then it goes on. So you can have, they have to finish the story again, come by and say, oh, that's not right, or these aren't, you have a few that are wrong. Oh, this one you might want to move. And they're gonna try to keep going if it's a game to get it in the right order. But then there's also game platforms. Bamboozle is my favorite. It's free. Ronan Casey, shout out to Ronan, created Bamboozle, and it's been available for years now, and it's still going strong, getting better and better. And the great thing is, if you join, you can follow different people and use different games. So I'll show you how you can follow me. So now this one, I'm thinking again like older young learners that I teach high school and university. So again, getting into adults also. So when we get to adults, I don't have games as the best fit. So I want to make sure that I can persuade you that games also work very well for adults, depending on, you just have to know your learners and what they like. But this platform is really cool because when you press play, you can have teams of different players, and then they'll get a question that'll pop up, and oh, she's got a lot on her right now. And I'll show you the way I do it, which I like, is if they guess it correctly, it's 15 points. And it could be also idioms you've already learned, or it could be seeing what they know or introducing them. Then if they guess it correctly before they see the choices, because I have choices, I'll show you on the next slide, then they get double the points. But they may not know, oh, she's got a lot on her. So the answer is plate, and you can get them to repeat the sentence. You can get them to also think of what would be a situation where someone would say she's got a lot on her plate right now. Oh, she's really busy, and then you can take, like, if you're introducing the stuff here, you could then take it and put it into something else. Or maybe what you're doing with this game is taking idioms from a story or from something else and getting that repetitive practice with them. So if you go to Bamboozle and you go to look me up, you can follow me and play the games. And I have games for lots of different levels, and there's lots of great stuff for very young kids on here. I don't teach very young kids, but believe me, if I did, I'd be on Bamboozle even more than I am. So much great stuff there. So if those are the best fit for kids, what's the best fit for adults? It could be things we just saw, but adapted more to their needs, interest levels. But there's certain approaches, task-based learning, um, for sure. Whether you call it task-based learning, task-based language teaching, task-based teaching. I usually just call it task-based learning. And we're going to see a couple more that you can see the flip side that it could work for kids too, for sure. But anyway, let's look at why TBLT works is a good fit for adults. So often there are real life there are things that adults want to do or need to do, like prepare for a job interview or a certain situation when they're traveling or in discussions where they need to express their opinions, for example, right? So it could be really different from kids because we could say, well, the kids are lower level. Well, not always. So if an adult's very, very low level, they still may need like language that's different, more that's better for task-based learning if they need to, introduce themselves in a certain way to people, that sort of thing that kids would not. Hugely important here. We didn't really talk about correction, or we didn't at all with kids. That doesn't mean you shouldn't correct, but I find better to give them more exposure to correct forms than to focus on errors. But here with adults, because as we saw before, there's the ability to reflect on learning and also, even more importantly, the need or the instinct and the need to want to know why and want correction. Um, we just have to be careful that we don't raise the affective filter, remember that, and increase stress, which could be a problem. But I'll give you an example very, very soon as how correction can work really well after performance. So I think that's the key. So that works really well with task-based learning. So an example would be if you do a job interview. So I have a course I teach called Job Skills where the students prepare for an interview in pairs. So they either, have a real job description because they're preparing for real interviews, and that's often the case, which is great. So it's task-based learning, but with something genuinely that's going to happen, or they know they need the skills to do this, so but they don't have an interview scheduled or coming up, so they look for a job description that's similar to what they want to do, and one of them takes the role of the interviewer, the boss, or and one as the interviewee, and they practice it, they rehearse it, and they learn expressions that are really important in job interviews, and we're going to get to that more with talking about communicative language teaching. So this is, communicative language approach for sure, task-based learning. And last month when we talked about communicative language teaching, and we talked about how task-based language teaching is a great example of that. And but yeah, the feedback I wanted to focus on for this one, the corrections. So what they'll do is prepare for it, rehearse it, getting that meaningful repetition, do it without notes, or just maybe looking very quickly at notes because they've really practiced it in front of the class, and not for us to critique them, but for us to, for them to perform it. And I take notes on their pronunciation, on their grammar, on errors and things, and then give them feedback. I send them audio feedback so that later, then you could also, video it or record it for them so that then they can listen to it and get the feedback and kind of listen again if they made mistakes. So the feedback is not just about correction, it's things they did well, etc. But what's really been valuable in this with task-based learning is that they do the task with the understanding that they're going to get feedback on it, and then that feedback becomes much more meaningful. But because they work so hard at the task, they don't always work hard, but you know what I mean, in the best case scenario, and because they're not being corrected along the way or during it, and they know making mistakes is natural and a part of learning, then they really pay attention to the feedback, and in my experience, that's a great way to do error correction that really, really works. And the students are really motivated to hear what they did well, but what they didn't do well, because they know that will help them in the future in a real life situation. So I have communicative language teaching, kind of much like I had, direct method, but I also had, TPR. So, communicative language teaching is not a specific activity. So it's this huge umbrella. But I want to put it here to then show you a couple activities that focus on functional English. Or I think maybe I just have one just for the sake of time here. But it's the functional English in the job interview also that they're practicing like certain expressions and certain things you need at a job interview. So I love you doing debates with adults. It doesn't mean that they're going to, have a real debate in real life. Again, this isn't necessarily for real life, but more, oh, in real life, you're going to have discussions and express opinions and argue and try to, support other people and, try to refute their arguments maybe. And you can do with all levels. I'll get to that one in a moment. This is just the basic format that I've used. It's not the only one you could use. Maybe 10 minutes is a little long for this. But what's great about leaving and kind of having them leave the room and discuss is that they're, you know, you have to really listen to what the other side is saying, even though they've prepared for it. And to have something new things that to take notes and then discuss. And you can do it as you see. This is set up so it's not interactive. They're not talking at the same time. There's no back and forth. It's to keep it so it's not a shouting match, but you can also work in. I am this semester actually working in a part where there's more back and forth. But what's really important here, I put it in bold, right? I mean, there's so many great things about debates. But for me, the most important one is the functional language, and that's the communicative language teaching. The main focus, right, is what phrases, what expressions are really high frequency and useful for particular functions. So expressing opinions, for agreeing, for disagreeing, those are big ones. For debate, for introducing ideas from research and so on. So here's an example. This is, when you think about CLT, communicative language teaching, you think about things like this, right? So here are very functional expressions that can be used in a debate. And what I really emphasize is, the debate is great in your opinions and everything else, and let me show you, what's really important, whether you actually are in debates in your life or not, is you're going to need this type of language. Now, we can also practice less formal ways to do this, right? But if you learn these, and they're highlighted in yellow, because to show them kind of a template, right? So if you have lower level students, as I was saying before, you can do this with students that are not so advanced, you could give them a script. In fact, that's what this is. It's a script for them to actually use to debate. So the first debates that I have with lower level adults is where they actually are using the script. So they're not even coming up with their own ideas. And they know that what's really important is to get that, we don't believe that, or in our view. And then, we can kind of switch the topic, same connecting words. And then when they go to choose their topic and have their debate, they know they're already, familiar with that functional language. So that works really well. One more best fit for adults. And this one really is the one that's most like, wow, this is adults. So maybe if, starting if TPR is, maybe not going to fit so well with most adults, but other things we talked about, like games could, certainly, what was the other one we were talking about? Direct method, maybe not Mr. Bean, but something else where you're just eliciting language, and getting them to repeat it, and not talking about it. But here, it's not about metacognition in the sense of like let's talk about the structure of English. It's using your first language Now you might think, but wait a second, shouldn't they just be doing only English? Well, for something like an activity with direct method, absolutely, no translating, and that works can work really well when it's done right. This is more, at least for me, very specific where you would use this. So, and especially, it doesn't have to be academic English, but I like, at least for me, this is how I think about translanguaging, which is something that I didn't call, except I called it, situations where you use your first language. Um, I didn't know this term. I found it when I was kind of looking for a term for this idea. And it's a little bit awkward looking, translanguaging. I've never heard anyone actually use it, but let me explain what I mean. So I have engineering students where I have a document with lots of, this is from my phone actually, finding articles, and then just the first page on the phone for the article. And so what you could do, what I've done, I'll just tell you what I've done. And there are many ways you could vary this. It's just, this is read a news article and discuss it. But, the twists, there are a couple twists. So one is that, they're different topic areas, so they can choose. Oh, I'm interested in AI. Okay, well, here are some recent articles on AI. Okay, you and a partner. It could be, small groups. So it says you and a partner, choose one you think is interesting, find it on your computers. In this class, they have their own computers, and take a look at it. But what do you do with it? So this is where um, the first thing would be using their first language. And let me explain. Uh, right off the bat, I like the idea of, if you're going to take something that's really difficult, high level English, like those articles are, um, then, and this also could be more academic, like for the TOEFL, for example, I do this all the time. Instead of saying English only at the beginning, which it's really hard to get, even higher level students, it's an effective filter issue. Well, not just that, it's also just cognitive overload to try to understand something and then discuss it. So, read it, right? Even better, read while listening, like immersive reading. If you want to have it be a listening activity too, they could also listen. But anyway, that's not important for this. The important thing is you say something like, discuss this in your first language. What do you already know about this issue? So they feel more confident, obviously, talking about something that's, a global issue, something in the news in their first language. But more important, not more importantly, what happens then is if when they are comfortable getting into it in their first language, paradoxically, they're more comfortable switching to English. Now, translation is not part of this at all. So I'm not suggesting that. But what you might think, and I used to think, and it's wrong, is that if they start in my case, this would be French. If they start doing it in French, it's going to be hard to get them to switch into English. But it's really, I found the opposite to be true. That if you push them to use English only on a topic that's, something like a global issue in a news article, they're going to want to switch to French because they're going to want to like say, but I want to get you to understand my idea. So if they're doing it first in French, it's kind of in a way getting it out of their system. That's maybe the wrong way to put it, but they're able to then do it in English much, much more easily. Oops, let me go back. So yeah, I mean, obviously they can think more deeply in French, in my example. And they're, usually get into the topic enough so that they, want to express it. And then if you're like, well, okay, you talked about it in French, can you talk about it in English now? And I'm going to come around and talk to you, and kind of, circle around, visit the groups, and talk to them about it. And then, you can elicit opinions, or if they're looking for certain information in the articles, or whatever you're going to do. I didn't go into that part. Whatever you're going to do with that article, so many things you can do. But yeah, the bottom line is more prepared and motivated to discuss in English. That is huge. So that's something translanguaging, like I said, I never knew that term before. But now that I started reading and there is a term, I'm thinking of, what other situations are there where adults, if they use the first language. Now, if you have a mixed group, could you pair people up with their first language? And maybe this is why I didn't do it that much when I was a teacher in the States, because for years and years I had so many different first languages in the room. But now that I'm here, where everyone speaks the same first language, or almost always, I think there are opportunities again with adults and especially higher levels to use this. So here we're back to Bloom's taxonomy as a way to wrap up today. Perfect example we were just talking about. Imagine students, not using their first language, but given an article in English to talk about. If they don't have this base, uh, from practicing it, from getting repetition, you can see the word repeat, then of course they're not going to be able to talk about, use English in a way to talk about something as deep as an issue in artificial intelligence. On the other hand, if they have enough practice with the language here, they might be ready, and then maybe with a little bit of their first language could get them up here. But probably the most important thing is with young learners that we make sure that they're getting, enough focus down here with building that foundation without thinking about, the forms and the structure, just through things like TPR, direct method, games, songs, that then they will naturally stay motivated to do more in English. And then when they're in middle school or high school and the curriculum becomes more, applying and analyzing, oh, they'll have the language already to do that. Because in many cases, in this country, I can tell you, students go to middle school without that. And there are really interesting activities happening in English class that they just can't do because they don't have enough of a base from practicing English. So, whether you're an adult or a young learner, I think a good fit, whatever the method is, it needs to be fun, it needs to be interesting. You need to learn with pleasure. And that's part of remembering. It's not just the practice. So, if it's something interesting, and you like it and it's a good fit for you, for your age as a learner, for your interests as a learner, then you're going to want to get repetitive practice with it to build your accuracy, gain the confidence to be fluent. And as I like to say, practice makes permanence. So if you get enough repetition in a fun way, and it will stick up here, and you'll be able to easily access it when you're using English. That brings us to an end of our webinar and the end of our webinar today. And I'll be back next month with the third in this series for the American TESOL Institute certificate. In the meantime, if you'd like a PDF of the presentation, don't hesitate to email me. I'd love to hear from you. Teachers always do. I've been sending out PDFs from recently the one I did about the IELTS. So it makes me happy to get emails when people want the presentation. So please don't hesitate. And also, if you have any question as a teacher, it would be a pleasure to hear from you. And it's so great to work with ATI, American TESOL Institute, and to be here every month. Guys, until next time, good luck with your teaching. And yeah, as always, peace, respect, salute. Bye-bye, everybody.